Well, good afternoon and welcome back. We have with us this afternoon a former House colleague of ours, Commissioner of DOT Vance Smith. And Commissioner, the microphone is yours whenever you're ready to start.
Okay. While y'all doing that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Mr. Chairman and members of the Appropriations Committee. I'd like to start out, if it's okay with the Chairman and the members of the committee, and just have the DOT board members that are here to stand up and be recognized, because we've had a working committee day today and boards tomorrow. So any GDOT board members that are here in the back, I see some of them walking around. If y'all will stand up and recognize the DOT board members. Okay, we're going to have we'll run through this, and however you want to do it, Mr. Chairman, we can go through it and turn around and ask questions in the end, if that's okay, and be glad to. I have a number of GDOT employees that are with us here today. Also, Ms. Kate Furman, who's our treasurer, is here. Mr. Todd Long is the Director of Planning. He's right here. Mr. Gerald Ross is the Deputy Commissioner. We have a number of people in accounting. Ms. Angela Whitworth is here. I know Stephanie Carter is here. Most of the House and Senate members know Stephanie. And so if we have any questions now, Mike Thomas is head of field services, all the districts. So if you have specific questions about that area in your district, just see us afterwards or ask us during the time. Will be great. We will look forward to talking to you. I think I'll start out and just give you a few facts and figures about some of the events from last week. If anybody's here and didn't realize we had an ice storm last week, I'll give you a couple of I was compared to Lindsey Scott at my age. I'm kind of happy to be compared to Lindsey Scott, so that wasn't too bad if you saw that on the news. But anyway, last week we had some 1,270 employees that responded to the ice storm. And that didn't count all the heroes, the people that work in the heroes unit, and our maintenance managers too. So if you add all that together, some approximately 2,000 employees responded last week. They logged in about 69,760 hours for the previous week. A lot of the things that happened not only happened during the ice storm and after the ice storm, but before last Saturday, we did some pre-treatment of some of the higher bridges that are in our system. And if you think with me, automatically you think of the Tom Moreland Interchange, otherwise known as Spaghetti Junction. Last Saturday, we started pre-treating those bridges because of the height and because of the temperature. We knew that some of those would freeze first. So we did that action. We used some 65,000 tons of material. When I'm talking about material, I'm talking about salt, 89 stone, those of you familiar with the grades of rock. So some 65,000 tons of material was used. And we also worked in a partnership with a lot of private companies around the state, especially in the metro area. So we had assistance through them, whether it was trucks to haul the salt and haul the gravel, or whether it was motor grader, that type of equipment to do some blading. Now, you know, snowstorms are different than ice storms, so at some point the blading of ice is ineffective. But we did have a lot of cooperation with the private sector, and we appreciate that. At this moment in time, we don't have all the final figures together. It'll probably take us another 10 days, I would say, Ms. Kate, to get all those final figures together. But at this point in time, it's run some $5.5 million, the storm that we incurred last week. So those are just a few items to give you. We always show you this slide. It talks about the goals and objectives of GDOT. I won't read through these. We talk about economic development. We talk about safety and security of the citizens of the state of Georgia. We talk about maximizing our assets, and we have a program now of asset management. Ms. Angela Alexander takes care of that for us. And we talk about minimizing the impact of transportation on the environment. So we're always cognizant of that. This next slide is just information only, tells you vehicles miles traveled. You'll see dating back to 1985 to the present, 2009, our latest figures, and just gives you an idea of where we are there. Next is a breakdown of the motor fuel revenue. And I know most of you probably know this, but some people, I know you have a large class of new people that have come on board, and we welcome those new legislators, House and Senate, to call us at any time with questions that you might have, and enjoy working with you. But you see how the federal gas tax, what it is, how the state gas tax is broken down. That 1% that is in the general funds, that amounts to about $125,539,907 is that 1 penny that's in the general fund. So a little information. Next page, purely informational breakdown of how that is figured. You can see from July 10 to December, and now from January to June, how the tax is figured, and it gives you the total tax. Motor fuel collections. GDOT survives on the motor fuel collections, coupled with the appropriations that you make as a General Assembly to our intermodal division. And you'll see later on in the presentation, intermodal, that's airports, ports, transit, and rail. Other than that, we live and breathe off the motor fuel tax. And you'll see in a few minutes, here's the chart in the past, actually you'll see right now. You look back in 08, we had a little over $1 billion in motor fuel tax that was collected. This past June 30th, $852 million was collected. The projection the governor's office has made for this year, $898 million. So that's up some, well, do the arithmetic, 35 million, 46 million. So that's up a little bit, and the past few months have been running pretty good. You see there with the 4 asterisks, we've collected some $470 million right now as of December the 31st. So that's positive. People are driving. So, you know, it's kind of interesting. We live and breathe off the motor fuel tax, but we talk about teleworking, we talk about van pools, we talk about the great express bus system that we have. And so we emphasize for people to carpool and ride all the bus services, ride MARTA when they can, yet at the same time we live and breathe off the motor fuel tax. So we're kind of working against ourselves there, if you see what I mean. But that's just the way it is. And then you have hybrid cars, electric cars, and cars that will eventually in the future, instead of 22 miles to the gallon, I've heard Todd say this a lot, they'll get 35 to 38 miles to the gallon. So it's kind of we're working against each other. But anyway, that's our projection, the governor's projection, 898. You look over the past few years on this chart, you see our motor fuel collections and what our debt service was. And I'd ask you to look at the box on the right-hand corner. Excuse me. You see back in 2003, our debt service was about 13%. And you look down to 2011, and now it's about 32% of our motor fuel collections. So our debt service has gone up. Around 1991 was the first year that GDOT actually incurred debt service, and since that time it has risen. Next page gives you a breakdown of that debt service. If you look at the middle columns, if you add those together for the amended budget 2011, that total is about $427 million. And for FY12, the total debt service, federal and state, is $436 million. If you total that up, 427 and 436. And due to statute, state law, you have a list of how we are to spend our money when we pay for contracts, pay for bonds, operating costs, the matching funds that we draw down federal dollars with, and so on. So that it's laid out exactly how we're to spend those dollars at GDOT. A few things that we've been trying to improve on, and you know, we talk about efficiency all the time. We've talked about it a lot these last few days since the ice and snow, but for years GDOT has undertaken an efficiency study of itself, trying to find the best way to spend taxpayers' dollars. And I use the example, you know, we've been working on, I know ever since I've been there, a little over a year and a half, and this coming Friday at 5 o'clock, we won't say, that group that meets, some 16, 18 people, they will not say, well, we've accomplished efficiency, now Monday we're going to take up something else. You never get to the end. You're always trying to be more efficient. You know that in private business. I remember that in private business. You're always trying to fine-tune what you're doing. So in doing that, we listed a few things that we're trying to do, whether we're trying to do with less manpower that we have, trying to keep transportation moving, keep people mobility and freight mobility and all modes of transportation moving forward. We've listed a few other things we're doing. Program delivery, that's certainly improved. Deputy Commissioner Gerald Ross has worked, and he's up to 29 project managers now. We're trying to have people start with, when you have a project, in the very beginning, you assign a project manager to that project, that person's name's on it, and they push that project all the way to the ribbon cutting. Instead of, as in years past, somebody in one cubicle they'll do their work and pass it over the top to the next cubicle, and it'll lay there a few days, and then they shuffle it down to another cubicle. That person's pushing that project all the way to the end. So we think that's a more efficient way to perform these projects that we have. You've heard a lot about P3. Northwest Corridor, I-75. We're constantly working on that. We have 3 industry people that we're working on. I won't get into any details of that. There are a lot of rules and regulations when you go talking about P3, but we've had a number of one-on-one meetings with our industry people. There's actually another one Friday with the 3rd group, and this has been going on since end of April 2010. We started working on it in July 2009. And thanks to your efforts in passing SB 200, P3s have actually moved forward now with solicited proposals compared to unsolicited years ago, and it's working well. You see in that list MMPT and rest areas. MMPT is a multimodal passenger terminal downtown. It's a real exciting event because we have the City of Atlanta that's on board, Greta's on board, Marta's on board. The A.J. Robinson with the Center for Atlanta Progress is on board. We've had a lot of technical meetings, and also, and I won't get into the details of it, but it has gone out now, and there are a number of developers that are looking and very interested at working with us on the MMPT. So we're very excited about that. Rest areas also, we're looking at that concept to move toward a P3. A lot of maintenance takes place in rest areas. We've had to take a lot of gentlemen, ladies and men, off of crews such as asphalt crews and put them working, cleaning up rest areas and welcome centers. So we're trying to look for a new way to keep those open, at the same time not be as costly to the Department of Transportation. You see that we've had our strategic plans class, and Todd and his staffers have worked very hard on that, bringing that forth and having it pass this past year in June. And another, I think everybody sees, and we hear a lot about our hero units all across the United States, to be honest with you. I know we had a time task conference in Athens a couple of months ago, and we had a gentleman there from Illinois, somebody from North Carolina, South Carolina. They're interested in seeing how our hero unit operates in the metro area. And it has been very successful. It has a sponsorship that is on that hero unit. You've all seen that, State Farm. That is a contract, a 5-year deal that we have. It's worth some $8.7 million, $1.7 million per year, and we're 2 years into that contract. Now, people are always asking us about outsourcing. How can we do it better, or what are we doing at GDOT to make things more efficient and using the private sector? We have out right now for bids, for qualifications, the I-95 corridor that I think is some 112 miles long from South Carolina to the Florida border. We're looking at a total maintenance package for that interstate system. When I say that, I'm talking about guardrail replacement, the signs on the side of the road if there was a wreck and they're knocked down, striping, mowing, litter pickup. We're doing a complete package, and we've got 3 industry people that have done this throughout the Southeast, I know, and probably even wider in the United States, that have done these kind of contracts. So right now we're in the middle of that process. We don't know, compared to the numbers that it cost us to do it. When we get their numbers, we'll know whether we're saving money and being more efficient. But we use that corridor, and we're looking forward and hopeful that that will be something that will be very successful for for us and for you and for the taxpayer. Other statewide efforts we're looking at are guardrail replacements across the state, which is very costly, striping and the slate repairs and jacking on bridges. So we're excited about receiving bids on these type projects and seeing if we can save and be more efficient in that manner too. We've realigned some maintenance teams across the state. We've combined some shops actually right here in Atlanta, Georgia, and we've also stopped keeping a parts inventory that we have, and we've contracted that out, and that's saved us over $137,000 doing that. And this next slide kind of tells you why we're certainly looking at outsourcing certain activities throughout GDOT, because we have to. We need to if it's more efficient, and we have to because of the number of warm bodies that we have. You'll see right now we're at 4784. We have a few hires that we can do, what we call critical hires, working with the Department of Planning and Budget. But we've actually gotten under 5,000. I know when I came in June of '09, I think we were like 5,300 employees. Well, if you look there, 5,331. So we've dropped down to 4,784. Now, I must say, those 4,784 very dedicated employees. So we had some of them spent the night at TMC the other night. When they came in with their roller bags, I thought they were going on to the airport, but they were just there to spend about 4 days and work on the storm. You'll see on the maintenance, and this is kind of interesting chart here too, with the number of lane miles that we have in the state. You can see from when we started keeping records, actually '88, we had 3,069 maintenance personnel, so that put about 14 lane miles per employee, and now you see we're at 1,733, so that lane miles is practically doubled. And I still think they're doing a great job. All right, now let's look at the amended FY11 recommendations. The adjustment, and you'll see in a minute on the next page, our budget was reduced about $8 million. Projection last year was it would be $860 million. The actual collections last June 30th was $852 million, so we have to make an adjustment for that $8 million. And we did the adjustment, and you'll see in just a minute, in the federal aid matching. We're not losing federal money. Actually, it's kind of interesting. We're talking to our partners in Congress a lot, and we're listening a lot. And Dan Gentry, who works for us in GDOT, stays in constant touch with the congressional delegation and what's happening in Congress. You know, our collections from, well, let me state this. The federal amount of money that go out to states across the United States has not increased in the past few years. It's more or less been constant. So we're not jeopardizing any federal money, but that's where we put the reduction in federal matching. In the general funds, we did our 8% reduction, reduced the airport aid $300,000, transit, and the $271,000 reduction in matching funds for the urban transit systems. The amended mode of fuel recommendation from the governor's office. You'll see you can hardly tell on this chart. You'll have to look real close because everything was the numbers and the difference from 860 to 852. So you're seeing your federal matching is, you can barely tell it. It's down just a little, and then the total is just a fraction. And then the next is just a pie chart to kind of give you a visual of what that would look like in a pie chart form. All right, the amended budget recommendations on the general funds. Now, this is the one I was talking about, our intermodal division that has to do with airport, ports, rail, and transit. You'll see that there was a $300,000 reduction in airport aid. The ports remain the same at $685,000. We pay a property tax bill that's a little over $500,000 on the ports. And then the rail, we actually see the notation at the bottom. We had a transfer from transit to rail to keep enough employees in that position to keep our rail division going. And then you see the 8% reduction right there. Here's the fund source on federal motor fuel. That $26 million is not new money. It's just increasing our base. So it's not an additional $26 million, so don't get real excited about that. The motor fuel funds, there is the adjustment from the projected of $860 to the actual collection of $852. That's the reason it's a reduction of $8 million. Then you have your reduction, $571,000. That's that 8% reduction that we're required to do. And 12, the recommendations. Here's your governor's estimate, $898 million. That's up, like I say, 5%. And when we get to the next page, you'll see where it went to these three categories. Also on the budget, the 9% reduction there in the general funds. And then there are slight adjustments due to ERS, and you'll see some of those $1,600, some of them $950, but slight adjustments there, and you see the transfer from the transit to the rail at the bottom. Now here's your chart on the FY12 motor fuel recommendations, and there, bottom right hand, you'll see the governor's recommendation, his projection on motor fuel of $898. The $860 was projection last year that was in the budget. And then again, another pie chart just to give you another visual. On that pie chart, if you look on both of those pie charts, LMIG, that's the local grants and LARC program. You know, we've had the opportunity over the last year and a half to meet with a lot of you in your cities and your counties, and you come in, you talk about the bridges in your area and the roads that need work in your area. It comes out of this LMIG money. I call it LMIG. It comes out of that money right there, and we form partnerships with a lot of cities and counties, and they understand that the money's not there for us to write a check to say, here, go home and fix your road or your bridge, but we've tried to ante up statewide, GDOT, and the locals, and try to perform some of those duties the best we can. So it seems to be working very well. Here's a kind of a chart that shows you the state general fund. Again, airports, ports, rail, and transit. That's that category over at GDOT, and we're dependent on general appropriations. No motor fuel money included in this chart, strictly appropriations from the general fund. So we're down now to about $6,228,000. And some of those reductions affected us, and you saw that a minute ago on the airports and on the urban area transit systems, and some of the work we're trying to do on high-speed rail. Those are areas that are being affected by that reduction. All right, now on the intermodal program, the airport, ports, rail, and transit, here again are your numbers. Current budget, the governor's recommendation with our 9% reduction right there at the bottom, $632,947. And here on our fund source, you see that you see the $26 million top right. That's just amended in. That's not new money. Then you see the projected motor fuel compared to the projection last year of $860. This year's projected $898. I will say that, Kate, if I'm wrong, July and August were pretty much about $80 million each month. The next month we were probably about $78 million. This past month we were about $72.9 million on motor fuel collections. That's December. And then here's some of the situations that we're in waiting federally for them to take action. And you know, you've heard that old expression, and I'll credit Kate with this. She used it this morning in a board meeting, workshop meeting. You know, it's going to take an act of Congress. Well, it's going to take an act of Congress for them to act, so we'll know how to plan what we're going to do in the future in the state of Georgia. Right now, the continuing resolution expires March 4th. So you think about it. Here it is, the 19th of January, and March 4th, that continuing resolution is over. So they've got to extend it again. We'd love to see a bill that would last 6 years so that we at GDOT, working with y'all and the citizens, can make a plan for the future for transportation in Georgia. But right now, we're just kind of leapfrogging along is what we're doing. Of the monies that we receive from them, some $1.2 billion this year, as of this moment in time, we've received approximately $456 million. So we're not quite halfway. So, and that's all, you know, that's just where we are. I mean, that, you know, and we continually have an open conversation with all of our congressmen, and we have a great relationship. The board has a great relationship with them. We have a great relationship. It's a team effort working with them. So you see some of the challenges that face us in the future. Maintenance is always a challenge. The board has stressed over the past year how important it is to maintain. And, you know, you just put it in very simple terms. If you build something, and when you cut the ribbon on a big project here in the state of Georgia, it automatically slides over to the maintenance list. Once that project's open, it goes straight to the maintenance list. So we've got to maintain some of the great projects that we've have done in the past few years, thanks to y'all, and that's very, very important. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll take any questions, and we'll work it as a team and try to answer anything that we can for you.
All righty. Well, Commissioner, it looks like House Transportation Chairman Jay Roberts, your first question. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, I got a question, and we've talked about this before. You talked about in the amended 11, or the 11, excuse me, in the amended 11 budget that there was a $300,000 reduction in airport aid. Does that, or will that affect how much federal dollars come down? If not, I mean, I know we've had problems in the past. If we've cut that program, and because of the cuts, we did not receive some federal dollars that would have come down because of it. Is this $300,000 reduction going to be a cut from any kind of federal dollars that would come down?
No, it won't. And if you look on the chart, and I should have, I don't know the page number, but if you'll look in 12, that airport money's coming back. What's going to happen, we're going to be able to perform some contracts up to June the 30th, 2011, and then we'll just have to hold off, and then come July 1, 2011, the money will be there. So it's just a pause in the action.
So we're not losing any federal dollars?
No.
Okay, thank you.
Now, we can always use more money for more federal match. We're not losing anything, but, you know, we've talked about in the past, federal money on airport aid, 95% of the money is federal.
Correct.
2.5% is state, and 2.5% is local. So any time that we have enough money in the budget, and these are unusual times, but when we get back to more normal times, we'll have that 2.5%. Hopefully the locals will have 2.5%, and we can draw down the other 95 in a faster manner than what we're doing right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, good to see you up there, and congratulations. Your people did a great job last week. We're very proud of them.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate that.
I have a little good news for you. You know, every year I don't beg for anything but a little crush and run on behalf of Stewart County, but this year voluntarily, Pulaski County and Early County want all that crush and run sent over to Stewart County, so that'll help us tremendously.
Well, I'll make a note of that right now, but it might change in a little while because I see he's got his light on over there. Yes, sir.
In all seriousness, Commissioner, rail transportation is critical to the economic development of our section of the state. We bought a rail line, 12, started about 14, 16 years ago. We purchased that line all the way from Omaha, Georgia, Marta, Alabama, and now almost to Savannah. It's owned by the state of Georgia. And I noticed we've only got $161,000 in the supplemental, and nothing was requested by the department in the big budget, and the governor has recommended $250,000. This is a critical economic development corridor. It's got to be repaired, and it's owned by us. And do you think the $250 will do the job statewide, or will it help us, or are we in danger of losing the parts of that line because of federal safety inspections?
Let me answer that like this. And I appreciate the years I had in the General Assembly working with y'all, and I appreciate the short time I've been over here where I am now. Sometimes you understand what you need. We understand individually what we need personally. We understand what we need in private business when we're in private business. And I think we understand as a group where we are statewide and spending the taxpayer's dollar. I think can we use money in different areas in GDOT? Yes. Should we go at this point in time and say we have got to have this money and this is the only way we're going to survive? I think we need to step back a little bit because every state agency out there has got a critical need list. And I hope I'm clear on this. It's not that we don't want to ask and perform certain duties and programs that we have in GDOT, but I think it's sometimes, you know when to ask for them and when you shouldn't. And I think right now we should let the new governor get his arms around this. Y'all got great appropriations, House and Senate committee. You've got your hands and arms around it. But it's not that we don't need it and we don't want it, but when is the right time to ask for it? when we're such a crunch. Yes, we know, and we've had instances, and I know working with the board, and I can't say whether it was 4 months ago or 12 months ago, because time flies, but we had a bridge that was out down in South Georgia on one of the rail lines, and it was a huge problem because a lot of your industries were across the bridge and they couldn't get back, and we worked, and thanks to the board, we found some money from another area just to pull it over, fix that bridge, get that line going. I think the speed on that line is probably 32 miles an hour or something like that to get that line going. I think we just have to prioritize, and it's not that we don't want it. You know, we'll take a big bucket of money, but right now we're just not asking for a big bucket of money. We're trying to get through this period so that we can come back and ask for that list. And I hope, I'm not trying to dance around the campfire on you, that's just kind of the way it is. I mean, you know.
As long as you're cognizant of how many.
Well, we've got over 500 miles of state-owned rail line, and there are businesses along those rail lines, and there are economic development associations and counties, that some individuals, some that work together, and we understand those are jobs right there. And so I guess what we're looking for is that balance. How do we balance what we're asking for and what we really know's out there? And so that's kind of where we are, trying to balance it.
Good afternoon, Commissioner. I have a couple of questions.
Yes, sir.
I don't have a copy of your slides, but could you look at the page where it had the the debt service percentages?
Yes, sir. Page 9.
Okay.
Oh, no, page 8.
Yeah.
That little box right there.
And it's real easy to see that in 03, you had a 13% debt service. And now it's up to about 32%. Now, your predecessor moaned over the fact that DOT was the only department that had to pay their debt service separate. Of course, you're the only department that gets dedicated funds. My question is, the large increase in debt service due to the Fast Forward program that we put in under the previous governor? And were we robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Well, I'd like to run out there and answer that question if I could. Because, you know, you always say I want to be part of the solution because I was part of the problem, you know, and I guess I should say that I was part of the problem, and now we're looking for a solution. I think, you know what, we have some great projects on the list. We have projects all across Georgia. Are we paying for those projects? Yes, we are. I think right now, and listening to the board members over the past year and a half, we're at the point that we're trying to say, well, we really don't want to take on any more debt service. Let us pay some of this off. Let some of this start dropping off the books. We talked about it this morning at 11 o'clock meeting. Some of the GO bond debt service is going to drop off gradually, not very much right now, but probably through 2015 through 2019, we're going to start seeing some of the Garvey debt service drop off, and so we'll see a little bit of difference. So I think having voted on some of those issues budget-wise, right now, I'd say we at GDOT, we're going to live with our debt service. We're just giving you an example of what we are, but we're going to live with it because they are good projects. And that's a tough thing, is prioritizing and saying what project in Georgia is better than another one. So we'll maintain what we have right now. We really don't want a lot more debt service, but we'll look at it, but we're just kind of riding our own right now.
Now, I remember one time you and I had a discussion, and you said timing is everything.
That's right.
My second question.
Well, I thought that might have been
when you were here, sitting out here,
yes, sir.
You were in favor of some kind of express lanes or whatever that would go bypass Atlanta, come down towards LaGrange, and then come across. You got
we've got to divide it. Hot lanes. We got a divided highway US 27 you're talking about that comes down from Rome?
You were in, if I remember correctly, in favor of a lot of these rigs bypassing Atlanta.
Truck routes. Truck routes.
Yeah.
Truck bypass.
Is anything being looked at for that?
Well, we've got corridors right now. We're working on one, 441, over in the center part of the state. That can be a good truck bypass once it's completed. And Fall Line Freeway that we're working on some now in Wilkinson County is, I know, one of the projects, and we've got probably 2 more projects to finish it. That'll be from Augusta to Columbus to keep people from coming I-20 to Atlanta and around 285 and south. So I think some of those in the works is, again, it's all hinging on the dollar, and it's just taking a while to perform those projects. When the money's there and we can complete those. US 27 is a great example. It goes from the Florida line all the way up to 75. We like the bypass around Somerville up north. We like the connector between 185 there and LaGrange, about 4.7 miles. I could be wrong on the distance. And then we like 3 projects, of which one of those will be done, will be contracted out between now and July 1. 3 projects down in South Georgia, down around Early County, and I think Randolph. But we're lacking those connector points. There are a lot of connector roads that we've got to do, and we just got to be patient because we're gradually getting there with the economy like it is. And when the economy comes back, hopefully we can finish those connector projects out even quicker.
Thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Representative Gardner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner,
Yes, ma'am.
speaking of connectors, in the middle of my district where 485 come together, I understand that you have a plan for a fairly massive connector, which will be helpful to the people of Buckhead and others. My question is about the funding for this connector, and can you outline for me maybe very briefly the cost of the connector and where that money is coming from?
Yes, ma'am. That money will come from toll collections on 400, and it's approximately a $40 million project. Could be a little bit less depending on the bids. A lot of the bids we're receiving now, thank goodness for the citizens and for y'all and for us at GDOT, some of the bids are coming under our estimates. So, but it could be $35 to $40 million project, and it would be a connector coming south on 85, the Sidney Marcus area. It would be to improve that connection between 400 and 85.
So all of the funding for that is coming from the collection of the tolls, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to publicly thank you for your work of all the department folks with the neighbors who are going to have a 3-tier flyover right next to their houses, and I want to thank you publicly for the important work you've done in trying to work with those neighbors.
Well, I appreciate that.
It's a win-win situation for everybody.
Well, thank you, Representative Gardner. I know the GDOT employees, one sitting right here, has gone out and walked the trails under that. It's going to be worked out in that whole plan, that trail system, and Gerald went out and walked that. So we're happy that FHWA. So FHWA, we got 2 gentlemen, Rodney Berry and Bill Farr, have been great partners with us here in Georgia, and they're great to work with. So it's a partnership, but I appreciate that.
Way better than it.
Thank you.
Senator Tolleson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, as you know, the senator from the 14th is a great American, but every now and then he gets confused about whose crush and run is whose crush and run.
Yeah, I knew that was coming.
Just always remember that.
Yeah, I will. Yes, sir. I'll make a note.
And I need a little asphalt down in my district. I just kind of want a quick I-16. I travel it a lot, and I'm not sure which pit hole I'm going to fall into and not come back out of. And I know you have a plan. Y'all have a plan for that, but could you just briefly just enlighten me on that? I know the port system and all the truck traffic and stuff, that road takes a pretty good beating.
It takes a pretty good beating. That's progress, I guess you could say. That's the price we pay for progress, but we do have, and I'm going to tell you, my mind is absolutely blank. Let Gerald answer on that.
Good.
All right.
Yes, sir. We actually have a project right now. They're already doing a couple of the lanes, replacing the slabs. We have another project once we can find the funding to finish it up. It's really maintenance. It's a maintenance job. It's concrete, so we're replacing the concrete. And we also have the other big project on that. It's in I-16 and I-75 in Macon. We're in the process now of buying right away, so we're that much closer to redoing that entire interchange. The project itself is about $300 million. But what we're going to do is phase it in. We'll do pieces of the places where we have the highest accidents, do those first.
Okay, thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner, I just want to say I do have a question, but I just publicly wanted to say how responsive GDOT was to me with a couple of constituent issues over the storm days. I didn't get one call. I got 3 calls back from your department. I think we talked as well.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
But I wanted to ask a question. With the funding now of the digging out the Savannah port and with competing for the commerce that we'll have, I'll have a 16-year-old son and a 15-year-old with a driver's permit at that time when the roads, I think they said they're going to triple the number of trucks on the highways. So I'm just kind of curious about what sort of thoughts going into preparing for that.
Well, that is going to be an issue because right now they have about 7,000 trucks a day that come in and out of that port. And by 2015, when it's projected that the Panama Canal will open, we in Georgia want to be ready, and I know the Ports Authority working with the governor and working with the congressional delegation, and we talked about that issue this morning too at the workshop. We do want to be ready. It is going to increase that truck traffic, and so we're looking at a lot of last mile projects that are in that area. The Jimmy DeLoach project is one that comes to mind in the very beginning, how to make it easier for those trucks to access in and out of the ports, because they predict that it will go to some 15,000 trucks that go in and out. Now, we do have rail systems. We're fortunate in Georgia to have 2 of the primary rail companies, I guess, in the East Coast United States, Norfolk Southern and CSX, and they have yards there that they take stuff from the trucks, put it on the trains, piggyback, and they take it by rail, which is good. So it's going to be important to sit down, and I know the board knows this too, to talk about and have a plan when that opens up to do that, and we will do that.
Chairman Yates.
Yes, to my friend, the former member of the Conservative Policy Caucus, hope you still think that way.
I do too.
We used to hear it said that we were had the best maintained roads in the Southeast and everything. I don't know what organization did that. How do we stand on that, and who does that kind of stuff?
Representative Yates, my friend, we officed together for some 17 years, I will say, and I appreciate Mr. John Yates, a great friend of mine. I was on a conference, here again, I can't give you the month, it was in the past year and a half. I was at a conference near the back of the room. Somebody else from Georgia was up near the front, probably 75 people there. The gentleman speaking, Pete Ron, he was the DOT commissioner in Missouri and in Arizona at one time, and now he's with a consulting firm. He was showing what they had done in Missouri to try to improve their road conditions, and if you looked at his chart very closely, he was showing his graph of how they were improving in the state, but he said you always had to have a baseline to work toward. And at the top, there was a long red line, and as I looked real close with these bifocals, it had the word Georgia out beside there. So it made me feel pretty good that I'm in a conference and this gentleman's trying to reach that baseline, and the baseline was the state of Georgia. Our goal, the goal of the board and us at GDOT is to maintain Georgia, keep that red line with our name beside it as the best road conditions in the United States, because other people are striving to top us. They want to take over that red line. So there comes that word maintenance that we've heard at the board meetings and we're talking about today. That is huge. Maintenance is huge. And if we maintain those roads as they should, we'll continue to be the one that they all strive to be. But it made you feel pretty good. You know, the other person from Georgia actually turned around. I can remember just looking back at me, and I just kind of did the thumbs up like that. I didn't say anything, but that was great to be recognized in that conference. But we do have a great job, and that came from years and years of former employees, former legislators working with us, and that's the reason we're up there. It just didn't happen. It happened because of a reason, and that's because everybody worked together, teamwork, so partnership. Thank you, John.
Representative Dawes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Smith, I also want to thank you for all your hard work, and I appreciate the ride home after the session on Monday.
I think that was somebody else that gave you that ride home. No, if we did, you're welcome. Okay.
But I have the same concerns that Representative Kaiser has about the increase in the number of freight trucks on our highways. I thought that they were just going to double. Triple scares me even more. But as I understand it, only 17% of the freight is going to be handled by rail. And I assume that a huge percent, or at least a significant amount of the trucks are going to be coming right to the metro Atlanta area. And when I drive on 85 and 75 and 20 and anywhere in Georgia, I always feel like I'm taking my life in my hand already. And when we increase the number of trucks, I'm concerned that, 1, 3 years isn't a long time for us to prepare for this. 2, I'm also concerned that the increase in the congestion around the metro Atlanta area is going to actually hamper our opportunities to bring businesses into Georgia. I'm just delighted to hear about all the new jobs this is going to create, but if we can't handle the congestion and people and businesses can't get their produce wherever they need to get it, how in the world are we going to handle this? Is there money in the budget to study this problem and the possibility of handling the freight more by rail?
No, ma'am. As far as actual dollar, now there's money in the budget that goes toward projects, and that's the $1.2 million that we draw down from the federal government. As reminded by Todd, this has been going on a year and a half or longer. The freight logistics study has been taking place in Georgia, and I'm assuming will continue to push as we go into the new administration. So it's a slow process according to the dollars we have of how much we're going to expand highways, but we need more rail to take care of some of those rail projects. And if you'd like to address that, you're happy to. But I agree with you 100%, but we've got to have a plan.
Yeah, we're in our major freight logistics study now, and it's kind of coming to fruition over the next 6 to 9 months. And we're looking at all the different routes. We're looking at the percentages breakdown between freight. Yeah, right now, you're right, 17% is by rail. We'd like to get that number up instead of where it is now. But all that we're doing is kind of driving us toward what are the corridors we need to encourage people to go down and where we need to make the improvements. The problem in the end game is going to be to do the big improvements you need to get freight out of Atlanta costs a lot of money.
Chairman Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My good friend, we miss you back here on this side, and I think you jumped out of the frying pan into the fire. But I think you're doing an outstanding job under difficult situations. You got a good board.
Thank you.
But I think we got a pretty good replacement for your seat, best I can tell right
now. Somebody said in the back, now I'm asking him for money. That's never been that way before.
But what I want to ask you about, there's been untold number of discussion about high-speed rail up in our area. We all get excited about it. The feds have come down. We've talked to them about its own go, buy in on it, that sort of thing. As of right now, I understand the project is scrapped. Kind of bring us up to date. Is this something we can expect or just forget about or what?
I don't know if I'd use the term scrapped. I think, when the feds say we're going to give you X amount of dollars across the United States, some $8 billion to look at high-speed rail, number one, we have to be, as business people, we have to say, how much will $8 billion give us? What kind of rail lines will that put in? We've got a couple of studies that we want to look at. We've got a $4.1 million grant to look into rail. We've got a $13.2 million grant to look at the Atlanta to Chattanooga line. Everybody's line, the Charlotte, from Washington to Charlotte to Atlanta is an important line. There are a lot of lines out there. It goes back to even our commuter rail line from here to Lovejoy that we started out with several years ago. So where do we start and where do we go and where will that additional money come? Because $8 billion will give you a study, but how much will it take so you can stick a shovel in the ground? I think that's what's very important right there. So I don't know, I wouldn't say it's scrapped. I'm just saying the whole economy, United States as a whole and Georgia as a whole, it's just not there right this minute. We need to be prepared when it comes back, because I think rail, freight, and people mobility plays a part in when we talk about all modes of transportation. So that's where we just, we've got to be patient, but we've got to be forceful and keep looking at new ways to improve rail in Georgia. We've got a backbone of a rail system right here, Marta. There's a backbone of a rail system that's probably, and the people in Atlanta know better than I, 30 years old. Do you take something like that that's a solid foundation, you build upon that? Maybe so in commuter rail. That's not high speed, but that's commuter rail. So I think we're going to have to decide which way we want to go. If it's not high speed or it is high speed, if it's just commuter, if it's light rail, we've kind of got to all get together and decide which way we want to go on that. So thank you.
Representative Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, good to see you again.
Good to see you.
I'm going to go back with the freight and maintenance theme that we've been discussing, and you've mentioned that maintenance is a large part of our annual expenditures, and we've also talked about how much of an increase we're going to see in freight travel once we get the Savannah Harbor project completed. Could you discuss for a moment how the reopening of weigh stations and monitoring of the weights of trucks through our state would, and what kind of effect that would have on the maintenance of roads and our expenditures on an annual basis?
It'd have a huge effect. We're not in charge of the weigh stations now at GDOT, just for everybody clear, but we've got a working relationship with the enforcement division that under Colonel Hitchens that takes care of this, and he's a pleasant gentleman to work with, and he's a good business person. So that's ongoing. That relationship is ongoing, and we see, and I know they do too, it comes down to the number of people you have, how do you keep them open, but if you can keep them open more, there will be a certain amount of revenue that will come in that will go toward the maintenance, and it will ward off people. When a trucker knows it's not open, guess what? He might accidentally haul an overload, you know what I'm saying? I won't say that from past experience, but I'll just say, but I mean, that's just the way it is, because they're all looking at the bottom line. How can I make that extra dollar or two? So, yes, it is a joint working relationship with them, enforcement, and we're going to continue to do that to see if we can get those open again. And that maintenance, that control of that weight is the life of that road. You take that weight that's on those vehicles, along with the maintenance that you do to highways, that's the life of a road right there. So, thank you.
Mr. Commissioner, it looks like the last question is coming from the chairman. Chairman Rogers.
Commissioner, I really want to direct my question to Gerald Ross, if I could, if you'll take a back step. And Gerald, I need to know what projects y'all have let in the last 6 months, and what is designed right now, how many, and where they are right now. Can you give me an indication on that right now? No. I know y'all have let some in the last couple of months, but give me a quick overview.
Can you tell? I can. Off the top of I can get you a list. Off the top of my head, I can tell you that the proposed letting for the next month, which will be February, will be 67. It's 101 for the next month, 111, and then 124. So I know those numbers because I just left looking at them. Projects that I've just led in recently, I can't tell. Oh, some future ones. Some of the bond programs. 441 is a project that we're about to let. Washington County State Route 24, which is $50 million, we're letting in June. I-75, we're working on now down on the south side. Also a paving job in Dooley County, which is probably $40 million, a concrete job. That's in June. I can get you a list.
Okay, if you would, I would appreciate it.
How far going from when to
Well,
where?
for the last 6 months and what's going forward, and I probably need to get from the department also what you have in the Treasury right now. That would be helpful for the budget hearings Monday. You and I have talked about a bridge project several times in Hall County that was put on the shelf probably 3 or 4 years ago. It's Highway 283 over the Chattahoochee River. I know that it's been designed, and there was a pre-bid of estimate of $5.5 million. Can you give me an indication where it is right now?
I'm going to let Todd. Todd might know that one better than me.
Yeah, I don't know what year we have funding on that. He's talking about Mount Vernon Highway, not Mount Vernon Highway, but Clark's Bridge.
That goes to the
Across
governor's
Chattahoochee,
home.
right. But I can get you that fiscal year, what funding it is. So.
Okay. It was put on the shelf in the previous administration, and the bridge is probably 62, 63 years of age. Yeah. And I know the commissioner is familiar with that kind of bridge because it's the same kind of bridge. It was in the movie True Lies. You remember that movie, Mr. Commissioner? So, but it needs to be updated. It was going to be a clear span bridge proposed. Right. And one other thing, Todd, while you're up there, why don't you give us an overview on 277, where it is? And
sure. All right. Well, as a lot of you guys know, if you've been reading the paper, local paper, you've seen us in your communities because we're just finishing up, I guess, the first round of meetings with the roundtables. Matter of fact, we have our last first roundtable meeting tomorrow night down in Mount Vernon in the heart of Georgia Regional Commission. And we're going, this first meeting we have with these roundtables, really they do two things. The roundtable forms, they come together and they elect an executive committee, which is a 5-member committee, part of the roundtable. And that executive committee will be the committee that really rolls their sleeves up and comes up with the final list to present to the full roundtable. And the other thing they have to do while they're in this meeting is develop the criteria for the project selection. And several of you have been in these meetings. I will say that the meetings have gone very well. A lot of the folks that were outspoken maybe against the bill in the beginning are now coming around to see, hey, listen, this is an opportunity we have to bring additional revenue. And all the things that Commissioner said before now in this presentation basically screamed one thing. We need additional revenues. And this is an opportunity under the regional sales tax to do that. Now, will all 12 regions pass it? It's the jury's still out on that. Certainly, I think the process that was established by this General Assembly last year is working. Now, we've got to get through this summer. In the summertime is when the project, that's the hard part, when you got to select those projects. And ultimately, by October 15th of this fall, that roundtable will select a list of projects that will be then used in some kind of various campaigns all across the state, and ultimately the voters will decide in the summer of 2012 with an up or down vote on that list. So that's where we're at. Certainly if you have any questions, feel free to call me. I've gotten great support from a lot of the county commission chairs that are on the roundtable and some of the more influential mayors that are in the state, and they've really stepped up to the plate, and the same ones that were probably in your ear during the session about things they didn't like about the bill. So that's been very encouraging.
We've got time for one more question. Senator Jackson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, my respect and admiration for you continues to go on for many years after you served here, and I've watched you in this position, except the time you carried me from Athens to Atlanta at 110 miles an hour.
I didn't. As a figment of your imagination, I didn't do that. I'm only as fast as Lindsey Scott, remember?
I almost hate to ask this question because I somewhat know the answer, but I think the people that I represent over yonder in the 24th District would really love to hear me ask this. I want to say that Todd Long has visited over there with us relative to the one Highway 17 and has answered many, many questions, but I still get them daily and weekly. What I would like to see and hope to see, that we would have a plan of action for certain avenues through the state that would move our freight from the ports up to the northern points. And this 17 is one of those corridors. I think we've recognized that. And it's from I-20 to I-85, which would cause our freight lines to be able to miss Atlanta, not have to go through there. They can go 26 over to 40 and on up north. And so what we're wanting, and I know it's money, but at some time I hope we'll get it. I probably won't be here, but I'm hoping we're going to get it because it's so important to that corridor, that Savannah River corridor, that has great industry there in Elberton, the Granigan industry, and much more. Plenty of water, plenty of workforce, and,
right.
and we're not being able to move stuff through there. So what I'm wanting to see somebody in high places mention it, put it on a map, draw a yellow line that the people will say, yes, they're talking about that now. We don't talk about it, and so consequently we get punished with that word continuously, and so I'm hoping we can do something in that area. And I want to thank Todd for the way he's conducted the meetings over there, and he's informed very well, but we're still frustrated that this great road could be a great benefit to moving the traffic from the ports. Thank you very much.
Yes, sir, Representative Jackson, Senator. I hear you loud and clear. And we do have some great roads, and 17 is one of them. We met with the 17 Coalition. I don't know their formal name. Some 40-something people came by and we met with them, and we understand the importance of that road, as some others in the state of Georgia too, but we do understand that importance. And with that, Mr. Chairman, if I can make one comment.
Yes, sir.
I may never get this chance again. You know, today is going to be gone after midnight tonight. But my wife and I are proud of our son, Kip Smith, who's in the House of Representatives, and we just want to say I told him when he first came, and I said, now, Kip, you go over there and keep your mouth shut and act like your mama. And I think he's done that pretty good. So, but we look forward to working with y'all. We'll try to answer any questions you have. We want to team up with you, partner with you and the governor's office, and you know, let's keep Georgia the great state it is, and we appreciate the opportunity.
Well, Mr. Commissioner, I'd tell you that us as House members are proud of you and the job that you've done, and that Kip is one of the better days' work you've done too. So
well,
I'll just tell you that. We're proud of him, and thank you so much for all you do.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
If everybody could take your seats, the commissioner's ready. Okay, thank you. How you doing? You're going to have to beat your big hammer because they ain't listening. Getting hard to hit. Everybody would please take your seats. Commissioner's here and ready to go, and we're running just a couple minutes behind. Mr. Commissioner, we welcome you this afternoon. Now, I would warn you to please talk slow. We don't quite listen as fast as what you normally talk. So if you just keep that in mind as you make your presentation. But welcome. Commissioner, we're proud of you and look forward to working with you. And as everybody settles in, they'll get quiet here in just a second, but the microphone's yours, the podium's yours.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman England, Chairman Hill, the committee. I do appreciate you all to give me the time today to talk to you all. I want to first and foremost say I've been there for less than 2 weeks, and I promise you I'm trying as diligently as possible to learn as much as possible, as quick as possible. But if I cannot answer a question, please know that I have a couple experts here, and if they can't answer it, we'll get you an answer by the end of the week, I promise you. But I just want to talk a little bit about the department and what we are doing and where we've come from and where we are today. For most of you all know this already. We are simply the sales and marketing arm of the state of Georgia. Our main goal every day is to bring jobs to Georgia, to keep jobs in Georgia, to expand jobs in Georgia, to bring money to Georgia through investment, tourism, and trade. And I will tell you this, it's been a short time since I've been there, but I've been very impressed with all the people I've met at that department. They work hard, they care about what they do, and they care about bringing those points of interest to this state. We have 3 divisions. The first is global commerce, which is the division you hear the most about usually. It's the division that attracts new industries to Georgia. More importantly, it keeps existing industries here, and we try diligently to expand those industries. If we can't keep those industries here or expand them here, we're going to have a hard time bringing new businesses to Georgia if some are leaving us at the same time. We also have a big trade department. Our trade department has been very, very successful. Tourism is the forgotten about child sometimes in the department, I think. It is an incredibly important part of this department. It's one that I'm not sure we highlight enough, but we will continue to try to improve upon that as we go forward. And the last division is our film, music, and digital entertainment. And that is simply in place to promote Georgia as a desirable location for entertainment projects. This slide shows what our budget's done between fiscal year 2008 and by the end of fiscal year 2012. We've had 31% cut, and we are not complaining. We understand the situation the state is in, and we are happy, although reluctant, to accept the cuts, but we are going to do the best we can with whatever you give us. We are here at your service, and we appreciate everything you've done for us. The next slide shows where the cuts are coming from. Marketing has taken the brunt of the cuts. We used to have close to $18 million in 2008. We are now down about 51% to $8.8 million. Personal services, the people. And again, our budget is basically marketing and personal services. I think it's 87% if I'm correct, 84%. We've seen that cut about 18%. Some have been resignations, there have been layoffs, and there have been terminations, and it's just the nature of the beast. We're going to have to continue to look at our organization and decide, should the money continue going to Area A, marketing, to personal services, or somewhere else. As I go forward for the next 5 or 6 months, I'm going to try to do an overview of what I believe is the right way to go. But the people before me have done a very good job, including the department. People are still there in the department, positioning us to where we're at now. We've still been pretty successful, which we're about to show you right now, I think. Global commerce, the first division I spoke of. Since July 1st, the beginning of this fiscal year, we have located 117 projects. We have created 7,700 jobs, and they've invested $2.52 billion in Georgia. Now, to give you some perspective, in 2010 through the first 6 months, we were up 20%. We had about 6,400 jobs through the first 6 months of 2010. Today, we're up to 7,700. Investment is up 29% from the same point in 2010. And again, we're coming from a bad point, so we're not seeing the recovery we want to see, but we are seeing gains and strides being made. And these numbers are more impressive when you think about the organization been contracting because of the budget cuts. But again, our people have managed to succeed despite that. Existing industries, and again, I want to really try to emphasize, keeping people here in Georgia is the #1 priority, and expanding those industries. They're the companies that brought us to where we are. They gave us our success, and we need to help them as much as possible. Of the year-to-date numbers I just told you about, existing industry was about 67% of the jobs we talked about came from existing industries, and about $1.4 billion, which is about 60% or so of the investment I just spoke of, came from existing industries. International trade. This is an area that, I'll be honest with you, I'm learning more about every day. Well, there's a lot of areas I'm learning more about every day, but this is one of them. We served 680 Georgia companies last year. Most of them have been small companies. A lot of people look at trade and think global, huge companies. This is small business in Georgia. 50% of the folks that we service in international trade have less than 20 employees. 33% more have 20 to 100 employees. So we are talking about helping small business in Georgia. Of the 119 deals we have closed, the potential value that we're looking at is about $16 million. And 54% of those deals have come from our international offices. I'm looking at those as well. I was wondering what they're doing, but based on numbers I have seen, they have been tremendously successful. And again, they're serving not just large companies, they are serving the small companies of Georgia. We developed about 3,200 leads, and when you develop a lead, understand that the start to the end of that process is years. It's not something that happens overnight. It takes time. So the leads we develop this year will be paying off for us, hopefully, the next year, the following year in 2012 and 2013. And again, 54% of those leads were again obtained by the international offices. Some success around Georgia. I wanted to make sure everyone understood that This isn't just about Metro Atlanta or rural Georgia, it's about all of Georgia. Here are some of the biggest headlines we've had of the year. I'll pick a few out. Convergent ERS in Richmond brought 400 jobs. Gulfstream and down in Savannah, $500 million worth of investment in 1,000 jobs. Systemax in Jackson County, 15,400,000 jobs. And the list goes on, but I'm not going to bore you with going down it. But again, it's all across Georgia, and we're very proud of what we have done, and really not me. The department has done this before I got here, and they have really shown me that they do a very good job. Tourism, again, I talked about it earlier. Today was the first day I went on the road to do an event, you might say. I've been asked to do a few company openings, but I've really been trying to stay in the office to learn and mainly study for this committee, because I like it a lot better being out there than being up here, just so you all know. But I went down to Millersville to kick off our 150th commemoration of the Civil War. And we're doing a 5-year project, and we're hoping to bring more tourism to the state, but it is an incredibly important area. And again, this area has shown us hope. Now, this area tends to do their studies through calendar year and not through the fiscal year, so the numbers are a little bit different. Our lodging industry, fiscal year 2010 through November, is up 7% in revenue. Occupancy is up 6.9%, which that's important for the bottom line for Georgia, but it's also important to realize that we are seeing some type of tide turning and bringing people back into the state and more travel. We are the second fastest growing state for international visitors. Again, I'm going back to the international side because it is tremendously important in a fast growth area. And it's up 9%. It's only behind Virginia. The economic impact of tourism in Georgia is over $30 billion. That's a lot of money. The local and state tax income from that is $1.5 billion. It employs 234,000 Georgians and generates $6.6 billion in wages. They are staggeringly big numbers, and again, I sometimes think it gets forgotten about, but it is tremendously important to us. We welcome 11 million visitors to our visitor information centers. A lot of times these are people's first look at Georgia is coming to those centers. We've got professional people there helping people every day, make hotel reservations, whatever else they need. We've also tried to start reaching out to social media. Facebook is exploding. Things like that are exploding. We're not 100% sure the best way to utilize it, but we know there is a way to utilize it, so we are working on that currently today as well. Our film, music, and digital entertainment division, the numbers have been staggering in terms of its growth. Obviously, we have to thank the legislature for the tax credits they passed in the past. It has grown us to $397 million in direct budget expenditures. That's an increase of 400+% over 2007. We've had 159 film projects, and the Georgia film industry has a tremendous number of return customers, including Disney, Alcon, and Sony. I do want to say that the department itself is important, not just because of the production that's here, but the companies coming to service those productions that are not getting the tax credit incentives. They're coming because they know the productions are coming. We have studios like Screen Gems coming to Georgia, and down in Savannah, we have catering companies, we have makeup companies, we have lighting companies. They're coming with no benefit in the tax structure that we passed, but they are coming to Georgia and paying their fair share. And that is our organization in a nutshell. I do want to say this. We know that legislation is very, very important to us. Without you all, we can't do what we do. I've known a lot of you for a lot of years. Please know my door is always open. If you have questions, concerns, please raise them. I am learning every day. And trust me, that's not going to end, it looks like, for another 5 to 6 years. So hopefully, if I'm still employed by the governor, I'll be there a long time to learn all I need to learn. But thank you again. We promise to be good stewards of your money and do our best to whatever dollar you give us to expand it by the biggest multiplier we can.
All right, Commissioner, we've got a few questions. First one coming from Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Boy, I've been waiting for this day. Oh.
I've been dreaming about it.
No, seriously. One, I want to thank the governor for putting that money back into One Georgia, and we look forward to working with you on that. That's something that's important to us in the rural part of the state. But you talked about it earlier briefly there on the slide that you've got up there now about the film tax credit. You know, the recommendation is to do away with that. Could you tell me what kind of local impact that has had? Do y'all have any numbers as to what it's brought in locally to these communities where they've come in?
Chairman Roberts, thank you for asking a question I know sort of the answer to. We have a study that's in the field right now. We expect it back in the coming month that will show that impact, and once we get it, we'll get it to you all immediately. It should be by the end of January, but if it's a week or two off, it is an independent study that's the actual scope of it is return on investment for Georgia entertainment industry in the locality. So we'll know more then.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator C.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner, I want to ask, what are some of the barriers you all are hearing when companies choose not to come here after the courtship?
I've heard a lot about those. Thank you for the question, ma'am. It depends who you talk to. A lot of it is some states can offer higher incentives. Sometimes it's the fact that a lot of companies sometimes use us, to be quite honest, when they're in bidding for their own. They want to stay where they're at, not just us, but other states to increase their package back home. But we have a really good tax structure for economic development. You all have done an incredible job. Again, I thank you in terms of the statutory credits you all put in place. We are a very, very attractive state to folks. And the governor talked about jobs, and in his budget, he has helped us in One Georgia Authority and in some other places to have some more tools in the toolbox, the best way to put it. But, you know, if we lose them, sometimes it's because a board member's from there. Sometimes they beat us on bottom line cash. But again, every time we get somebody in there, some companies we might want more to fit a strategic goal. Sometimes other states might want them. But again, we're very happy with what you all have given us to use. We always happy to accept more, but we also know that's probably not the case in this current environment. So we'll take what you can give us. But we're in pretty good shape in terms of what we offer to other states. But we're going to, like every other state, you can't win them all. And there's some states like Texas and South Carolina, especially Texas, that have a lot of money for a reason, like oil and other things that sometimes it's just hard to beat what they can offer.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Has transportation ever been a part of that discussion as a barrier?
Since I have been there, we have not talked about it, but you know, obviously, yes, I think it's obvious to think that transportation is one concern people have when you look at reports in New York Times and Los Angeles Times, but the legislature addressed that last year as well, and we're working on the referendum next year, which I believe if we can get passed, it will help us tremendously. To answer your question specifically, it's hard to know which companies never came to us for an offer that might not have come because of our transportation problems. But again, the good news is the legislature dealt with the problem the best they could, and now we're going to move forward and hopefully get that referendum passed. And I think it'll help.
You're learning how to answer questions very well.
Thank you, ma'am.
Representative Ballard.
I want to follow up Chairman Roberts. Congratulations to y'all on the film industry. I see that evidence in my district almost every week. Last week, Matt Damon was filming at the CDC near us. My question relates to the move of the Tobacco Settlement Cancer Coalition money back to your budget from Regents, which represents about a 25% increase in your overall budget and represents the total restoration of your budget cuts. This may be early for you to answer this question, and I appreciate that, but what has that $9.2 million been spent for? How has it been measured? And what are you going to do differently that's going to support the research industries of Georgia and, for instance, the Winship Cancer Center in my district? How are you going to measure any changes you're going to make?
First of all, it does, quote, increase our budget, but it is a contract level. We are not looking to take money away from them to spend in other areas. I think the movement from GRA and the Cancer Coalition to us was a signal that both their missions are to create jobs in different areas in Georgia, and it's just realigning what synergies we can find, what other areas we can cooperate in, and just a signal to say that we are going to work together. I'm not looking to take any money away from that endeavor. Cancer research is as important as anything the state has, but that's, you know, we're going to look forward to see just, again, synergies. We're not looking to take money from what their projects are or what they're doing. We're just changing where they're going through.
Briefly follow up. One Georgia money gets how much of the tobacco settlement money now?
I do not know that. Let me see if John does. About a third.
About $30–40 million then. So are you going to be using this Cancer Coalition money to synergize with One Georgia? That's what my...
That is a fair question. To be honest with you, we haven't got that far down it, and we will, and we'll look at it. But, you know, I'm looking for anyone to give me ideas on how to best make the money work best in Georgia. But again, our main goal here is this money that we have got contracted, we are now contracting them, is not changing what they're doing on a day-to-day basis.
give us a list of how that money has been spent thus
Okay.
far?
I will get it to you.
Thank you.
Welcome, ma'am.
Chairman Parrish.
Mr. Commissioner, thank you for the good information, and the slide that you have on the screen right there now, I think demonstrate how well the movie industry has done in Georgia with the legislation that was passed by this legislature. Also, another slide that you had gave us some good information on tourism and how important it is to this state and how many jobs it creates and the money that it brings in. But what I'd like to ask you to do is to comment a little more, if you would please, on some of the things that are sort of an intangible. By that I mean filming some of the movies in Savannah, like the Miley Cyrus movie, the Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, Forrest Gump, and this sort of thing, and what that brings to this state in tourism. And if you talk to some tourism operators in Savannah and places like that, I think they'll be quick to tell you that when they have out-of-state or even out-of-country tourists come in there, first thing they want to do is go to the park and see Forrest Gump's bench or do some things like that. So it seems like that the state gets a tremendous amount of advertising our tourism attractions through the movie industry that doesn't really cost us anything and brings in a lot of people and a lot of revenue.
Well, I appreciate the comments, and I think the question, I think you answered your question, by the way. You did a good job at it. But there are a lot of intangibles, and ones that, again, we're trying to study financially. The tourism aspect of a mother and daughter coming down to Savannah because Matt Damon's in town to shoot a movie, I'm sure it happens, and I'm sure it does. I'm hoping this study will have some answers to that question, but I don't know firsthand. I just know that currently we are seeing major investment in Georgia, not just from the productions, but from companies setting up base here that will be paying their fair tax share.
Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. I've enjoyed working with you in your different positions and glad to see you here. Two questions. One is, can you tell us how important the port is from your perspective of selling the state as we look for manufacturing companies and logistical distribution companies coming into the state? That would be the first question. And second of all, what are we doing to go to other states like Illinois and start setting up shop to invite them back here as they see their tax structure change and taxes go up? Or are we actively pursuing some of those states, perhaps some of those businesses?
To answer the first question, which I don't want to spoil Curtis's presentation he's coming up with, but the Georgia ports are essential. I mean, you talk about the 3 things or 4 things in Georgia that drives companies here. The ports are 1, 2, or 3 every single time. I can't say enough about them. As far as the next question goes, it's, you know, I'll be honest, in the last 7 days I haven't thought like that, and I should have. It's a strategic way to think. There are a lot of states that are changing their tax policies to the less pro-business. I believe this legislature and past governor and the current governor have done the exact opposite. So we do need to look at things like that, and, you know, I promise you all we're going to start looking into it and see what we can do.
Representative Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Minsky, thank you very much for your presentation. I had a question about, in your presentation, I didn't think that there was any detailed information about actual integration of the companies that actually locate here. What I'm concerned about is we make all the expenditures up front to recruit them here, and I'm wondering if we have any expenditures or any system in place to support logistics of actually planting and growing their business here, so that our investment will pay off in the long runs, that there'll be less incentive for them to leave. Are there expenditures made in that regard?
Well, I think you go back to our existing industries department, which their job is to not just, when the company comes to them and says, we want to expand, what can you do for us? Proactively go to the companies we brought to Georgia and say, what can we do to help you? And that's investment that way. Logistically, I'm sure there are. I don't have the exact answer for you, but I'll find out for you. But I know existing industries, again, I was under not the false assumption, but I didn't know the extent of what they do, and it's been pretty impressive. These are not people see on their heels. They're out there aggressively trying to go to companies saying, you know, if you did this and expanded here, we can get you these type of credits and money back, and it's been impressive. I think that's what we're talking about. And so, yes, we're doing it. I'm not sure the direct expenditure is anything more than the budget we put in place for existing industries.
Well, this next one should make you nervous if it hasn't already, but we've got a used car salesman going to ask you. Senator Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hey, Senator.
Mr. Commissioner, we've hit some home runs, or your department's hit some home runs down in LaGrange with Kia and with Gulfstream and Savannah and so forth. Those are really great projects. And where do you see our biggest opportunities, real briefly, in terms of expanding manufacturing, bringing really good paying jobs to Georgia that bring all these ancillary companies with them?
I'll answer that at a fairly high level because, again, next week in 2 weeks, I'm going through all the project lists of what we have in the pipeline. I don't have all that information now. I can tell you from what I've seen, aerospace, automotive, we have seen a rebirth in Georgia, both those industries. Kia led that, but Toyo and other places have come on top of it, and I think that's one area. And again, the aerospace industry, but I'll know more, and I'll be happy to sit down with you in a few weeks once I start seeing where we're going with it. And again, it is important. Now, we're going after companies everywhere. We never want to say no to a company. But on the other hand, there are some strategic areas we want to focus on, and again, manufacturing is obviously one of them.
Thank you.
And Chairman Rogers.
Yes, tell me who your new staff are at this time. Have you made any changes or?
No, sir.
Can you tell me who's in charge of film, video, and global commerce and tourism?
Greg Torrey.
Greg Torrey? Mm-hmm. How about global commerce?
Pat Wilson.
And tourism?
Kevin Langston.
Okay. Are you going to make any other changes anytime soon?
There might be one or two changes. No new people coming in from outside the organization. We might shuffle things a little bit. Again, I don't look for wholesale changes of an organization until I have time to look at the organization for more than a few weeks. But there are a couple things that have been brought up to my attention that we might just change. And it's nothing more than just trying to fit the right people in the right areas, but it's very minimal.
On personal services,
yes, sir.
How many people do you have now in the department? Did I see 163? Is that what I saw? Or
167.
Okay. 173 possible?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, Commissioner, we thank you very much for being here with us this afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. Good luck.
Thank you, sir.
If we can be of help to you, let us know.
Well, we're here to help you all and serve you all, so let us know what we can do too.
All right.
Thank you all.
very much. Everybody, if you would, please keep your seats. Please keep your seats. We've got our next department up is the Department of Natural Resources. Commissioner Mark Williams is on his way to the front, as well as Director Barnes. Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
We'll limit call questions to 10 minutes.
Break a leg.
Commissioner?
You just remember when you
I'm ready.
You want the gavel of time to kind of settle them back down, please. All right, if everybody would take your seats, we're just a couple minutes behind, and I'm sure that the new commissioner, former House member Williams, will be glad to answer plenty of questions at the end. I'm sure he's looking forward to it. But Commissioner, welcome. As we've said earlier, we're proud of you and glad that you're here, and the floor and the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I could just take a minute. So many of you have asked, and I wanted to give you an update. Mary Caitlin's back in school, and she's fully recovered, had a little bit of eye damage. But they say the House and Senate's a family, and I don't wish a tragedy on anybody, but if you ever go through one, you'll see just how much of a family it is. So I can't thank you all enough for the cards and letters that you all sent. And just to follow up a little bit, since I have a little working knowledge, I see Chairman Parrish has left, but I got to do a back scene tour of the Jekyll Island filming down there, and the lady doing the tour told me that day, she said, "You want to know how many Glenn Countyans are employed today on this site?" And I said, "I have no idea." 250 people. So that's just a follow-up to Chris's presentation a minute ago. But well, anyway, good afternoon. I'm Mark Williams, Commissioner of DNR. Today I'll give you an overview of the DNR and underlying principles used in developing this year's budget request and the details of the budget reductions as recommended by the Governor. Our budget principles are, number one, maintaining law enforcement and public safety, protecting the health and environment, keeping facilities open, being fully cognizant of the local economic impacts they have, minimizing the delays in permitting and other customer services, and number five, fully leveraging federal and other revenues. Next, I'll present the details for the amended FY11 and FY12 reductions as recommended by Governor Deal for DNR, except for the Environmental Protection Division, which Director Barnes will be up after me to do. FY11 on my charts will be rolled directly into FY12, so at that point I will only discuss what is different for FY12. Then I'll turn it over to Director Barnes to do the same for the EPD division. As you'll see as we go through this, the items in italics will represent changes in all departments statewide, so I will not speak to those items individually. Our first division is our coastal section. I call your attention to item 2. We'll reduce funds for 2 admin positions and 1 biologist position. I next call your attention to our administration division. In item 3, we'll eliminate 1 position from retirement and eliminate 1 field position. I call your attention to item 4, where we'll be reducing operating expenses and eliminate payments to counties for miscellaneous services. On our next slide, we'll move to the Historic Preservation Division. Item 2, we'll be eliminating contract funds for regional commissions. These are grant payments to 12 regional commissions for historic preservation planners. This is a total reduction of a contract that we renewed annually. These folks, they were paid positions at, I think, $14,000 a position that served as historic planners in our RDCs. In our land division, we'll be reducing operating expenses by reducing miscellaneous items such as fuel, supplies, and travel, etc. In one of our largest divisions, in our parks division, item 2 will reduce operating expenses with the closure at Red Top Mountain, which happened on 7/1/2010, and other general system-wide reductions for a total of $270. Item 3 will reduce contracts by temporarily suspending the annual payment to the U.S. Corps of Engineers. We only have one place we did this. It was an annual payment, and it was at Richard B. Russell, and we have been sort of granted a stay, or we're not going to have to pay it, so we're going to take that out. Item 4, we're going to use bond money rather than cash for capital outlay repairs and maintenance. Our total budget for this state money was $492,500, so we're only leaving $17,500 in that account, so we're going to be relying on bond money for for repairs and maintenance. This moves us into our reductions in our Wildlife Resources Division. Item 2 will reduce personnel services by eliminating 17 positions and holding 8 law enforcement positions vacant for future training classes. Item 3 will replace state funds with other funds in the amount of $379,000 for personal services and forest management unit, and replace state funds with federal funds in the amount of $142,000 for an admin position in the licensed boat recreation unit and 1 mechanic. Item 4 will replace state funds with other funds for operating expenses in the forest management unit. Item 5 will use existing federal funds for our leased WMAs, our wildlife management areas where your folks do their hunting and fishing and bike riding and mountain climbing. We've taken all the state money out of that, and what we're going to use is the Pittman-Robertson funds, which are the ammunition sales. We're allowed to do that, so we're substituting state money with federal money there. Now, I need to note that that's not sustainable. You all know we've had a big bump in ammunition sales and gun sales across this country the last 2 years, so we have the money now, but we need to look for, in 12, we're going to run into some problems, and you'll see that as I go through. Item 6, we're going to replace state general funds and the 211 bond funds for boat ramp and house construction and maintenance. That moves us into 12. As I said before, we just rolled over. In FY, only thing I'm going to highlight are changes into 12 from 11. In our Coastal Resources Division, we're replacing state funds with federal funds for a fish population health survey position. Item 5, we're reducing operating expenses for gas and supplies, etc. Item 6, reduce contract funds for advisory groups. It's not a lot of money, but we felt like it's more of a want than a need at this time. These groups are advocacy groups that we had helped pay for some travel and stuff, so we're going to take that out. In our administration here, item 4, we're reducing personnel services by eliminating 1 additional vacancy from the amended 211 budget. That was $216,000. Item 6, we're going to reduce the real estate rent expenses based on an analysis that we did of real estate and operating historical trends for $84,730. In our historic preservation division, item 3, reduce funds for personal services by eliminating 1 field administrative position. In our land division, this is one of our major moves we're going to make. Our land division is really, is it 4 or 5 people? It's 4 people. And we're going to, instead of having them as a separate budgetary item, and not division, but department, we're going to move them in with WRD. So you'll see a reduction here of $426,000. We're going to pick that up when we talk about WRD. But the overall savings that y'all should note is it will be a net $200,000 savings to DNR to do this, to consolidate those 2 groups. In our parks for 12, we're going to reduce item 3, reduce the personal services by eliminating a full-time housekeeper positions and replacing them with temp hourly positions to match peak facility demand. In number 5, we're going to reduce the capital outlay funds by using bond funds rather than cash for our capital outlay repairs and maintenance, so it eliminates the entire line item. I need to sort of put a plug in for some folks that have been real important to us as our friends of our parks. Some of you that know those folks in your different districts, but as
Director Kelly can tell you, she's back here with us, they've been tremendously important to us. When in tough budget times, these guys, there's 18,000 of them statewide, and they're all volunteers. They paint, they mow grass, they've really stepped up to the plate, and I'm going to personally be meeting with those folks on Sunday morning and to thank them from our department. But they've been a big help to us. In our Wildlife Resources Division, in 12, item 3, we're going to reduce personal services by eliminating vacancies and recognizing the savings from retirement, and eliminates one field admin position. Item 5, we're going to reduce operating equipment funds with the fisheries sub-program. Item 6, reduce state funds for leased WMAs. This is sort of a projection type thing because we negotiate those leases once a year, and we try to negotiate them with market conditions, and we're hoping that we don't have to, but we're planning worst case scenario to cut our leases by 15%, which equivalates to 25,000 acres. So you guys that, representatives and senators that have WMAs in your districts, I can't stand here and say we're going to do this one, that one, or even if we're going to have to do any until I get through negotiating leases. But hopefully we will have some savings with our lease negotiations in these areas and won't have to eliminate any of them. Number 8, reorganizes the land conservation program, as I've already spoke to, and this saves us a net of $200,000 to the department by consolidating. And that takes us to our bond package, which is relatively small. But number 1 is a public safety. We've already provided some of our LE guys with these CADs. I watched them work actually this weekend. They're in-car computers that do GPS and a lot of neat stuff. But our conservation rangers had them, and we want to fully fund those to get all our guys up and going with those. And so we've got $890,000 in for that. Number 2, we're going to our repairs and maintenance that I've already spoke of. Since we don't have money in the budget for it, we're going to do all of that through the bond package at $6.5 million. And that concludes the budget presentation, Mr. Chairman. Would you want questions for me now, or Director Burns to come on up and do his? Okay.
Good afternoon. Let me state up front, when we get to questions, I'll be glad to let the Commissioner handle all of those, if that's all right with the... This should move through fairly quickly on ours. As you see, the statewide, as Commissioner mentioned, that's statewide changes across the board. The second that you see there, the $1.1 million, as it states, reduction of personal services. And what we did basically there was we had a program coordination branch that, obviously just what it said, it coordinated those programs, but primarily in all the districts that we have around the state. And as you know, we had to close some of those districts' offices last year, and so now we've basically eliminated that entire branch, and so we got some savings there from one, a retirement from a manager, and certainly then from the administrative services that we've consolidated back in our other areas, as well as some outreach functions that we actually lost. So that's what you see in this particular reduction. Then on solid waste trust fund, as it states, reduce operations $29,880. Jim, you want to flip over to 12? Same thing. You have the statewide adjustments, the same continuation of the $1.1 million, and then the solid waste trust fund, the reduction moves up additionally to $59,760. Pretty straightforward. Be glad to answer any questions or turn it back over to the Commissioner, let him have his questions first, and then come back however you would like to do it, Mr. Chairman.
We'll just recognize members for questions, and then that way, whichever one that they're for. First question, Chairman Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine's for Commissioner Williams. First of all, I want to say congratulations. I think you're going to do a wonderful job, and I want to say thank you for what I have saw so far in your dedication to our law enforcement part of your division. I think that over the last several years that they have not been treated fairly, let's just say, and I appreciate your willingness and dedication to help them. The question I got, though, is in the 11 and the amended, you talked about that y'all were eliminating money that went back to local governments.
Mm-hmm.
Could you tell me, Mr. Commissioner, what that money was used for with those local governments?
It was a contract with there was only 3 or 4 counties in the state, and it was for maintenance. You're talking about local governments, not RDCs, right?
Correct, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay. Maintenance, and we actually, in counties that we own, that the state owns 10% more of land, they were paid. And quite frankly, we weren't getting our money's worth, to put it for lack of a better term. And we were just mailing out these monies. Sometimes we were invoiced, sometimes we weren't. But the contract, luckily, is an annual contract, and it can be broken at any time. And so we're just choosing that we just can't afford it right now. So
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Amerson.
Commissioner, glad to see you.
Just fixing to sit down.
No, my question has to do with the historical sites. I noticed that you were going to reduce one person from somewhere. Now, can you tell me where that somewhere is? Because I certainly don't want it to be the Gold Museum in Delano.
Representative, if I could let Todd come up, my deputy commissioner. I've been here about 2 weeks, so I got a lot of employees, and I'm sorting through it, if that's okay.
Thank you. Yeah, we have a very good friend of the parks and friend of the Gold Museum up there.
I'm not sure which fiscal year you're referring to, but there's no reduction for personnel in the Gold Museum.
In the chart, it showed for historical sites, it had one.
Oh, the Historic Preservation Division. Yeah. Okay, that's separate from our Parks and Recreation Historic Sites Division. Historic Preservation Division was one administrative position.
All right, thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Todd.
Senator Hooks.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Each year we review and try to at least match and exceed the amount of money the State General Fund receives from hunting licenses, fishing licenses, boating licenses. One of the sales jobs that we have been able to do through all these decades back to our sportsmen is make sure that their money goes back, I know it's not dedicated, but goes back at least to hunting, fishing, boating, recreational licenses. How much money did, Todd, you may know, or you may be able to do this a little better than Commissioner, how much in general terms is this general fund receiving from the hunting, fishing, and boating license?
Say something real quick first. I will let Todd answer that specifically, but we will be proposing some legislation this session to increase that through our plantations and capturing folks that just shoot quail on plantations, sell them a little cheap. It's very cheap, under $10 or $11, I think, and then we can capture some more federal dollars with that count. But
combining registration and the license sales and including that increase we had on some non-resident fees a year ago, it's around $23 million that we're bringing in, and we're getting more than that in the general fund.
Okay, thank you, Todd.
Chairman Lynn Smith.
Thank you. Good afternoon. This is actually going to be for both of y'all. And first of all, welcome to you. I hate to tell y'all, but I graduated from Wayne County High School. I'm not going to tell you when, but so you're following in good footsteps, right? I want to point out to the members of Appropriations or those who are here listening for the first time to budget presentations, and both the EPD Director Barnes and Commissioner Mark Williams both made good points about what they're doing with their budget. But I met a white-faced Commissioner, Chris Clark, the first day he came into my office. I think it was around 2008. and his budget took the first hit when we first realized as a state that our revenues were dropping. And so over the past, from 2008 budget to 2012 budget, we have asked DNR to take 43% cut to its budget allocations. And so to both of these people, I'm going to say thank you. You've been on the in the infantry and in the foxholes in the beginning, but all of us are there now. And thank you for what you've done. I know for EPD Director Barnes, when he came in, his numbers were declining as well. And I think with the trust funds, you've hit about a 50% reduction in your funding. And so it's just, I'm trying to emphasize this, the seriousness of what both of these heads of these important governments in our state they're having to do a whole lot less. They're having to do a whole lot more with a whole lot less. And morale's been a factor, and I think they both have addressed it. So if you'll each just comment on how you're dealing with the morale and also your analysis of the cuts you've taken.
Morale, I mean, everybody wants a good career path. And so that's something I've noticed is maybe they see a dead end because they just see cuts. But I have found in the 2 weeks I've been there that these are some of the most dedicated people. I mean, you mentioned the 43%, but you don't hear it walking around. I mean, these guys, I have the most dedicated staff. From my parks folks, they're just getting out there and getting it done. My law enforcement folks, I think y'all saw their morale on Monday, the opening day of the session, how much they love their job. So we're dealing with it. Sometimes it's not always about the money, and so I'm working with these folks and trying to raise the level of them just loving their job. And so I'm going to work on that a lot more, but it's tough. It's tough.
Well, I can just reiterate what the Commissioner stated. We have a very dedicated staff, a very capable staff. Most of these folks chose these professions because they love exactly what they do. And it is unfortunate that we find ourselves in these economic times, but it's not just the state of Georgia, it's the entire country, and they recognize that. What we've tried to establish over within EPD is, one, we're going to treat people like we want to be treated, and we're going to treat people with dignity and respect. And if you do that, morale seems to take care of itself. And as I tell people within EPD, let's just go to work every day and do what we have to do. And if we run out of things to do, then we'll have one of those pity parties. But I don't think we're going to have that problem. So we'll just continue to carry on. And these people are very dedicated. They do wonderful work. Quite frankly, most of the complaints I get are that they're doing too good of work. So we will just continue in that vein.
Chairman Tollison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really have a comment and for both of you. And Commissioner Williams, congratulations on your job, and look forward to working with you on getting through these tough times. One of my thought processes from the state park standpoint, and I'll just kind of lay this on the table for you to chew on when you go home tonight, but what I'd really like to see us do with state parks is quit adding them. Let's finish up the parks that we have under construction, and let's take our dollars and put back into upgrading the parks that we already have. We're adding overhead on top of overhead on top of overhead, when what we need to do is focus on upgrading so that people come back to the parks and stay there. So that's going to be the mission I'm going to be on. I talked about it a couple of years ago, and I've talked with Becky Kelly about it and let her know my thoughts on that we need to reinvest in the existing parks that we have. Go ahead and finish up any of the new ones we have under construction, but let's take a breather on adding on to new parks for a while. And also, Director Barnes, your division, one of the most dangerous points we're getting to is that we're going to end up giving the federal government all the permitting processes back. And that is detrimental to the state and the business climate in this state. So I'd want everybody on appropriations to understand that. It's not that you're just crying, you're cutting me, but we really do need to understand. And we give these permitting processes back to the federal government, then people aren't going to come to the state of Georgia to open up businesses because they just added 3 to 5 years to their permitting process. So with that, we want to work closely with you to make sure that we deal with the cuts we have to deal with, but also not destroy your ability to do the permitting process.
Well, I appreciate those remarks because they're exactly right, and that's what I've testified before your committee last year, and we'll continue to do so, that how important it is to ensure the adequate funding of these federal programs, that they are delegated to the states, but there is a responsibility on the states to fund those in an adequate manner if you want to maintain that primacy. So I appreciate your remarks. Thank you, Senator.
On your first point, Chairman, I agree with you as well. We have between $120 and $123 million worth of repairs and maintenance on the books right now just for parks. And as you saw in my presentation, we had no state money for maintenance, so we're bonding out, and that's the major part, $6.5 million this year just to repair. So point well taken.
Representative Henson.
Thank you, and congratulations, Commissioner. Under capital projects where you're talking about budget reductions, you had repairs and maintenance and $492,500. You decided you would eliminate it and do it as a bond package. If you go back on your slides a few.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, that's still going to cost us $492,500, plus how much additional money is it going to cost us as a result of putting it into a bond package?
Well, the total bond package is $6.5 million.
I understand.
And so we're just taking, it was a budget item of $490. Our total budget there was $492. We're taking out $475 and leaving $17,500 in that budget item.
But that's going to still have to be paid for over the years.
Yes, ma'am.
And, my constituents keep saying, bond packages are still money that we as citizens of Georgia have to pay back.
Yes, ma'am.
Whether we pay it today or pay it tomorrow. And they're saying, why can't you not be spending the money currently? Rather than making us think that you're doing a budget reduction. This isn't really a budget reduction. It's just a shifting of how you're getting the dollars on that amount, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, ma'am. But as I stated before, there's a certain base level of repairs we're going to have to do on these state parks. 122 and some change million right now. If I just stopped today and said we don't need to do anything else of repairs that we need to do, roofs, bathrooms, heating and cooling. And so, but with the governor's recommendation, it's just $6.5 million. That's what we chose to do, was move that money. You are telling the truth. We're just not paying for it today.
Thank you.
Representative Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Commissioner, congratulations on your appointment. Look forward to working with you.
Thank you.
My question I would like to direct to Mr. Barnes. This is in reference to the chemical fire that we had in Athens, Georgia, that was, as you know, spilled over into Trail Creek, which enters the Oconee River. My question is, locally there was a lot of concern about the way this was handled. In particular, when you have to have citizens put out signs saying, do not enter these waters because of danger. And I guess my question to you is this: what is the protocol when chemical spills like this happen? Who is responsible for putting out the signs to let the citizens know that there's danger, that there is a safety issue with this waterway? And have you reviewed the manner in which this was handled, and are you satisfied in the manner in which it was handled?
Well, I'm never satisfied in the way anything is handled because we can always make improvements. Here, we actually discussed this matter with EPA, and EPA actually looked at our response, and they felt like the response was appropriate. Was the communication, and were I satisfied with the communication with the local officials and who had the responsibility to go forth and put forth signs prohibiting areas? No, I wasn't satisfied with that, and we're making some appropriate changes that will make people aware of someone, as you know, has to be in charge. Right. And that's really what I looked at and I will accept as we move forward with an emergency like this. You get a lot of people trying to deal with different functions in the emergency. But what you have to do is you have to have one person that says, look, I'm in charge here, and I'm going to take charge, and I'm going to tell people that this is what you do and this is what you do. That particular situation, I'll be the first to admit, there seem to be more discussions than someone directing in some of those areas. Those will be corrected.
Will you keep us informed on those? Because even though this was Athens, Georgia, it could be any.
Correct. It could be anywhere.
Any community in this state.
And it happens, to be fair to our people, you look at any of these, and I used to be with EPA, and you look at any of these emergency responses, this is the problem, is communication. Exactly. And someone stepping up to the plate saying, this is my responsibility and this is what you will do.
Okay. Well, I look forward to that report. Thank you.
Representative Ash.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Commissioner. I want to ask a couple questions about the Hazardous Waste Trust Fund and the Solid Waste Trust Fund. Let's start with the hazardous waste one. How many sites have been cleaned up since the existence of that began?
Representative Ash, I am so glad to be your constituent now.
And I am so glad to have you.
I know that's the wrong answer. I'm going to defer to Director Barnes.
Commissioner, all politics is local, and
That's
you are
right.
now local.
It was directed to you.
How many sites have we cleaned up using that fund since it was established?
I can get you the exact numbers. I think it's, somewhere around 50 sites. Jim, I can tell you that there's, 56 sites that we know about that we need to clean up to the tune of about how much money? About 51 million, which basically puts it in the queue, which is, I think, where we're headed here.
Well, and then my question is about the queue. How much money was collected last year by that fund?
Approximately 17 million, and I can give you, and we'll be glad to give anyone and everyone that wants to see it, chapter and verse to the penny as to what was collected and how it was spent.
I'd love to see those numbers for the past several years, because we do have this queue of local governments trying to fix problems and there's a fund that was established to do that.
Correct.
And so the idea that we may not be appropriating all of the fund in the way in which it was established is a question for me.
And I'll be glad to accept all of that if y'all choose to appropriate that back.
And then the other question has to do with the solid waste trust, and I sort of emphasized the word trust fund. I think it may have some of the same problems of collecting more money than we really appropriate back to its purpose.
You have about 16, 17 million in hazardous waste trust fund that comes in every year, and you have approximately, I think it fluctuates 6 to 8, is that correct, Jim, on solid waste trust fund? And if you look at that across the years, you'll see, to your credit, most of that has been appropriated back for those over the years. I understand, as much as anyone, I've had these discussions with a number of the members that I see here. I understand hard times when there are hard times, and we are all trying to do a very difficult task. yours probably the most difficult in the sense of it defines what we get to do within our difficult task. But you raise a very important point, and it's one that I really think needs to be addressed head-on and directly, and I've had some pretty candid conversations with a lot of you in this room about that. It's the way the fee is established right now, as you know. It comes into the general fund, and then a certain amount is appropriated back, and I can give you over the years exactly what that is. What was collected in each fund, and then what was appropriated back, and then particular sites that money was spent.
That would be tremendously helpful. And I guess maybe my final question is, isn't the Solid Waste Trust Fund up for reauthorization in this session?
It is.
Thank you.
Representative Knight.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. More of a statement than a question, but first, to Commissioner, thank you. I know on behalf of the sportsmen and the state of Georgia, I'm certainly glad to see that you're there. And as you know, pretty important to our economy. Our sportsmen spend about $5 million a day in the state of Georgia, and so very, very important. And thank you. I know you're a big sportsman, and thank you for being there. I just wanted to reiterate a little bit what Chairman Smith had said about the historical cuts that DNR across the board has taken over the years. In some of our better years, they didn't get refunded. So we're going off cut after cut after cut. And I know that's taken a toll on the department, and hopefully in better years we can look forward to getting you guys back up to speed, because you certainly bared the brunt of this. I know that the law enforcement, talking about some of the law enforcement cuts, don't we have some agreements with our federal agents, especially on the coast, where we're covering some of our coastal law enforcement? So guys, as we're aware of that, we do have contracts or I said agreements with the feds as we do this. I know it's going to be a burden, but we'll keep doing it. And finally, to remind everybody that Georgia sportsmen, through both their license that they pay every year, and then the excise taxes that we pay on our ammunition, our hunting equipment, our fishing, our boats, a lot of that comes back. And just want to thank you for your work there, and hopefully we can remember our sportsmen and women as they continue to support Georgia's great natural resources.
Representative Williams, Chairman Williams.
Mark, congratulations on your appointment. Be there 2 weeks, you've come up to speed real quick. But you did a great job over here in the House, and I know you're going to do a great job with the natural resources. I want to talk to Director.
I'll just need to tell Chairman Williams I do have a plug in my shotgun.
One of the concerns I've got, and I'd like you to kind of carry me through this, is this thing about the tires. More and more, it's getting to be an eyesore everywhere I go, piles and piles and piles of it. Walk me through exactly what happens when they collect that money. How's it accounted for? How do you know that they're sending the correct amount of money? How long do they have to get rid of those tires, and what happens if they don't?
Well, if you're talking about the fund, I'm going to get you the numbers to show that the problem is that, quite frankly, is the money has not been there over the last several years to send people to actually remove those tires, and that is the problem. And I'm hearing that from local governments all the time, and quite frankly, that's why local governments, I think, are taking a very active and vocal voice dealing with this fee that's be back up before this body for reauthorization. Because you have to have the money to have the crews to send out there to then clean those tires up, which is what that fund was created for.
Should it stay with the local people to do it, or send the money to the state and the state do it?
Well, that is a question. There's a number of options that could take place. When the fee was established and when the fund was established, it was created that there would be some synergies and economies of scale by having a particular group within EPD do that, and then the local governments would contact us, and we would then work with them and carry out those functions. And I think, quite frankly, when the funding is there, when the times are good, and we can have a discussion about that, I think you would talk to local governments and you would hear, I do believe that the job was done and it was done well. What you're having now, though, is the particular situation that you're talking about, because now we're getting a cumulative effect from a couple of years. And what I'm hearing from local governments is, they're calling us to do what we've traditionally done. Well, as you see, we don't have that in our budget. You can't do what you don't have money to do. And what we're all realizing in this particular area, as in many others, there are consequences, as you well know, of every decision that happens in this building, and that's one of them.
Yeah. Well, my other fear is that as these things stockpile, people are going to find places to put them out in the woods and other places where they can't be accounted for. And that
they're already doing that, yes, sir. Yeah. And that's unfortunate. I mean, that's we have now, what are this? These are the orphan sites now, Jim, that the total that we would like to clean up, quite frankly, we know of 28 sites, or there's in the priority, I guess, here, and then the estimated cost of these that we're aware of sitting here today is looks like about the estimated cost of about $350,000, and that doesn't even take into account all the other sites that really the questions that you're referring to. Because I get questions, and I do, and local governments call and say, this is the function that you've carried out traditionally, and I don't blame them. So they know our number, and they say, can you come to do this? And we have to then explain to them that, unfortunately, we cannot.
Comes back to revenue.
Exactly, yes, sir.
Chairman Tolleson, I think you got to follow up on that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Barnes and I have had a lot of discussions on this issue, and when people sit here and talk about, the funding for the trust funds and what I've committed to do with you, and then work with the governor's office also as we come out of this economic situation that we're in now, that we can dedicate those funds, set them aside. But the process, the whole process of the budget appropriation committees have to already know that that's going to happen. They can't. We're out here in the middle of a stream, and we just stepped off in a deep hole budget-wise. You can't deal with that today. But we look forward to working with that and refining that process and getting to the point where we have those funds set aside to do the job that they were set up to do, and that the people around the state of Georgia know that that dollar they're paying on a tire is going to be returned to help clean up. We all understand that, and we're going to work with you to go down that road and get that accomplished. But we all have to understand as legislators that we can't sit here today and just flip that light switch, because we are where we are. They were never dedicated funds, and so this has happened from time to time. But as we move forward in the process, we can work that out and get those to a point where they're dedicated or set aside where we can't be using them. But the appropriation chairs will already know that that is done at that point in time, and they'll know that those aren't funds that we can go and get. And so we look forward to working to help solve this problem and helping to clean these bad places up around the state that are going to keep growing because time's going on, and you just can't have it so many tire swings around the state, so it won't clean it up. But
well, look forward to it, Senator. As you know, and you recognize, we had a number of these, and I appreciate your leadership, and as well as Chairwoman Smith. You understand there's economic consequences, which is what this question was about. It's not just the cost of, if you don't clean up these tires, there are also economic consequences to that, and that's what I think we're having to factor in, and look forward to working with you on finding a remedy to that problem.
We've got just a couple more questions in the queue, and I'm going to ask the ones of you that are left, please keep your questions real short if you can, because we're eating into our next presentation. Representative Baker.
Mr. Commissioner, people from Nahana, Georgia say that they don't want you to go to your head when you're up here. They remember us from down in Nahana, so they wanted me to come and tell you that. Let you know that Nahana's watching you.
I am glad you know where Nahana, Georgia is.
Thank you. A quick question. Last year and year before last, there was some discussion about our state the golf courses, the state golf courses around. And, you know, they're some of the finest in Georgia. What is the situation, the status on our state golf courses?
What I've been able to learn the last couple of weeks is, you know, we put those out RFP fashion or tried to get some folks interested, tried to get maybe one or two conglomerates interested in all of them. What they wanted to do was take the good ones and not the bad ones. And so that is a work in progress. I don't have a better answer. We've got some making money now, and the ones that we're losing are probably still losing money. But the private sector just doesn't have an appetite for them right now, is the short answer. And so it's a work in progress.
Representative Dobbs.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is for Commissioner Williams. I need to apologize. I understand it's your department that was responsible for my ride home on Monday, and I thank you so much, and I loved riding in the big truck. My question is regarding the legislation we passed recently, increasing the amount of fees charged for park entrances and also for licensing and so forth. Has enough time lapsed since the implementation of that legislation to tell whether or not there's been any significant increase in revenues, and also any facts dealing with the number of folks that may have decided not to come to the parks as a result of the increases?
I'm going to let Becky address that, if you don't mind, Director Kelly. But thank you for your comments on my law enforcement guys, and those of you that have written letters, they appreciate that. They got every one of them. I sent them to them. And have you got a bear hunt scheduled anytime? Come on, Becky.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Becky Kelly, Director of State Parks. And Representative Dobbs, to answer your question, we've been working with our communities as best we can to show them the value of their parks, and recognizing that even with the increases that we've extended, they're receiving that value, and our attendance has stayed pretty steady and our revenue has improved. So that's the good answer. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Representative Hanner.
Commissioner.
Hey.
Yes, sir.
Sorry, Representative Hanner.
I also want to say congratulations, but I've got a short, quick question. To put it very short, this budget, these two budgets, am I correct in saying that no parks will be closed?
That is correct.
Thank you.
Well, that looks like everybody. Commissioner?
I'll follow up on that, Representative Hanner. We hope no WMAs. We're preparing for the worst, but those of you guys in rural Georgia and around those things, we're optimistic anyway.
Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Director Barnes. In the interest of trying to keep up with the schedule, I'd ask everybody, if you need to sneak out, do so quietly. We have our Ports Director, Curtis Foltz, coming up to bring us a good word.
Doing well. Doing great. Butch,
Butch Mill, we've been over in Athens.
Absolutely.
Great presentation. I'm commissioner today.
You got, the subtitles coming out of today.
Well, good. I'm calling your guy that you gave me his name and number about getting him to speak on our Rotary. We got a 200-member Rotary Club.
Fantastic.
It'd be a great program.
Great. Robert Morris is here. He's in the back walking. That's right there.
Right here, one around there. Looking at it right there.
All right. We'll get it on the schedule. If I can come, I'll be happy to do so. My pleasure.
You want me to sit here and do this?
Just push the button to the right? No, I can't. Huh? I can do it. Okay. I don't need to sit here. Why don't you guys just over here, Marie?
Okay, everybody, if you could take your seats, please. We need to move along. Thank you. Director Foltz, good to have you here with us. It was good to get to know you a little bit on our trip to Cuba back last summer.
It's fantastic.
Of course, we've cooled off a little bit since those days. But,
especially last week.
Yes, especially last week. Good to have you with us. And
great to be here.
The microphone's yours.
Okay. I will attempt to keep this brief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank the committee for having us here today. My name is Curtis Foltz. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Ports Authority. I put together 6 very brief slides. We've also, staff has handed out what I would really summarize as a recap of the ports, the economic impact of the ports that they play to each of your respective areas, and then also a little bit of literature about the deepening project. And again, I'm going to cover it in the presentation, but I'll be brief and hopefully leave some time for questions. I want to start off by just really expanding on the economic impact of the ports. I have had the pleasure of working in many ports throughout this country, most of the time on the private sector side. Folks, and I'm going to tell you, you have an asset in our ports that's really second to none. The ports are, in the port system, and assets that you have here in the state of Georgia are the envy of every state that's out there today. They constantly come to me and ask me how you did it, why you did it, how it got this way. But it's not a secret, but it's an outstanding tool that we have. The latest statewide job impacts that we have, the ports drive about just shy of 300,000 jobs throughout the state every year. Now, a couple of caveats that I would say. Number one, this is based on 2009 information, so the end of calendar year 2009, so we're somewhat dated by about a year. Even during the terrible economic times of 2008 and 2009, the ports added 10,000 additional jobs to the states. And I'm glad to say, since these stats came out, in the most recent calendar year that just ended in 2010, our business was up 20%. So if you ran these numbers today, the economic impact and the jobs would even be much greater than this. You can see the financials. I won't go through them. $1.5 billion in state taxes, $15.5 billion in personal income for Georgians. And I think a critical piece as we talk about economic recovery, 12%, or just shy of 12%, if you think about it, throughout the entire United States, of all containerized cargo that moves throughout the United States, 12% move through the ports in Savannah. A huge economic opportunity for any of you that produce goods throughout the state, whether it's poultry, kale and clay, forest products, chemicals, cotton, agriculture, on and on. Our ports are a great avenue for you to have access to markets around the world. If you think the ports are about Savannah and Brunswick, they're absolutely not. Our ports are at just as much your ports here, whether it's in Atlanta or in Macon, Athens, anywhere throughout the state of Georgia. And here are just some statistics that you can take with you that highlight the value of the goods that move through our ports and where they are either originating or they are destined to. And so at the end of the day, although the ports happen to be located on the coast, they are purely a conduit for commerce and trade. So we want to make sure that our ports are supporting commerce as efficiently to global markets as they possibly can. This slide helps when you have constituents in your local areas that may ask the question, why is the port important to me? Well, because if you buy any goods, if you consume anything, it doesn't matter whether it's a Walmart or Lowe's or Home Depot or CVS Drugs or Kmart, those goods, there's a high likelihood that those goods move through our ports. Same thing if you produce goods in any of your community for export. They're generally looking to our ports to have access to world markets. So again, don't think of it as it's not Savannah Port, it's not Brunswick Port, it's Georgia's ports for reasons, because it's for the entire state of Georgia. Just a quick, I mentioned earlier we were up 20% this year. This is just a slide that quickly shows, the third slide, the tremendous growth that we've experienced over the last 10 years. Next slide, I'll share with you that over the last decade, we've been the fastest growing port in the nation by a factor of 2x.